All right, let's dive into socket programming. Sockets are, well, another complex topic that we could spend hundreds of videos talking about, but we're focusing specifically from a Dart perspective here. So let's figure out how to work with sockets from Dart. We're going to import Dart.io, and let's import Dart convert. What we're going to do is a simple TCP server. So let's say var we're going to use asynchronous programming, so we have to mark this as async. Got a little ahead of myself there. And what we're going to do is we're going to bind to an address, and we're going to bind to a socket. So we want the local loopback, which is just simply 127.0.0.1. That's the same address for every computer that ever exists. And we're going to use port 3000. And let's just say print listening. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to await, and we're going to say for basically we're just going to wait for a socket. Once we get a socket, we'll say socket.listen. And we want to actually do something when we get some data here. And then we're just going to print that out. So we're going to print and we want to print the remote address along with the remote port. And the data that they sent. We're going to decode the values variable, and we should be all set to run this. So let's run this. See how we are listening? And there you go. What we've simply done here is we've used telnet to remote into the server. We've typed some characters. You can see the listening, and then the internet address is the local loopback. It's an IP version 4 on port 6000.222, and the data we sent was SAD ASD. Pretty simple, pretty easy to work with sockets in Dart. Some caveats you should really understand is some basic understanding of what sockets are. If you already know, feel free to stop the video. Otherwise, you may be scratching your head and asking some questions like, what are sockets? I'm glad you asked. So, think of your computer as a giant telephone book. And in that book are all the numbers to all the things you could ever want. Each one of those numbers is called a port. So, different programs can listen and communicate on different ports. For example, FTP 21, web traffic, typically port 80. Things of that nature. Those are called known ports. And then there's unknown ports. There are a lot of them. You can see how this was 60,222, even though we originated on port 3000. So understand that the source has an address and a port, and the destination has an address and a port. Once those line up, you have what's called a communications channel. There are two ways of communicating. There's TCP and UDP. There's a little difference between the two in that TCP requires a connection, quotey fingers, with a three-way handshake, and that's what we've done. UDP does not require connection. It just throws the data out there and doesn't care if it's received or not. What we've just shown here and experimented with a little bit is what's called a TCP server, meaning it listens for incoming connections and takes that data and does something with it. Whenever you view a web page, you're actually talking to a TCP server.